Hello and welcome everyone. I'm just waiting a few seconds so that everyone can join us from the waiting room. So today is January 17th, 2022, 26th, 27th. I'm a little bit confused. It's January 27th and this is our weekly HEALEY ALS Platform Trial webinar. So I see that the numbers are going up. I see more people are joining. Thank you so much for joining. People are being admitted from the waiting room. I think we have a good group now. I recognize many names. Thank you so much for joining us every week. So today we would like to give you an update on what's new at the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. So if we can go to the next slide. As you know, we started 2022 with the addition of a new regimen, Regimen E. That's really really exciting to have more spots in 2022 for people with ALS who want to enroll in the trial, because the other 4 regimens, A, B, C, and D, have already completed enrollment. As you can see on the next slide, we completed enrollment last year in 2021 for the first 4 regimens. If you can go to the next one. You can see that's the final enrollment and sample size for each regimen. I do want to thank everyone who has been participating in the trial, and I'm so glad that there's almost 400 people that have entered the open label extension. So the big push for 2022 is to complete the first 4 regimens in terms of analyzing the data for regimens A, B, C, and D, while the people who participated in these trials in the placebo-controlled portion of the trial can still be on active drug if they so wish, until we know the results of the trial. So that's really something that's important for us, to be able to give people access while we continue to follow the participants, and then ultimately we will release the results later this year. Next slide. And I do want to talk a little bit about our enrolling sites so that we update everyone on where we stand. As was discussed in previous webinars, we activated a total of 52 sites for regimens A, B, C, and D. They didn't come on all at the same time, and that's the way it generally works in trials, because sites need to be trained and certain processes and contracts need to be put in place until they can actually join the trial and start enrolling participants at their location. So this is the list of the 52 sites that were activated for regimens A and D originally. So if you can go to the next slide, I do want to show that we expanded to 2 more sites, Georgetown and the University of Southern California, for Regimen D. As we selected new sites, we continue to add them on a rolling basis. So this is the group of 2 sites that joined a little bit later, again for Regimen D. But we have more sites that we are working with to expand the pool of sites that are enrolling. So if you can go to the next slide, you can see on the map the 20 new sites in addition to the previous 54 that are planning to participate in the trial, and obviously they're joining now. So they're joining for Regimen E because the previous regimens have already completed. So to the right, you can see the list of these sites. We are working closely with all of them so that they can all be activated. So the final number, essentially, it's going to be roughly 74 sites in the network. And as you can see on the map, they provide pretty good geographic coverage. Obviously, there are some areas that are, where we would like to expand and provide more opportunities for people who live in those areas. But certainly, as shown on the maps, again, we continue to expand and hopefully we'll be able to expand even further in the future. So again, we have a total of 74 sites in the network, but sites are going to be activated for Regimen E on a rolling basis. So it's not going to be all at the same time as they complete their training and as they complete their contracts and all the certifications that will be brought on for Regimen E. So what does that mean from a practical perspective for people with ALS who want to enroll in the trial? Well, so at this point, most of these sites are active on regimens A, B, C, and D, but they're not enrolling new people. They're following the people who are on the previous regimens, and then sites will come online, on a rolling basis to also open new spots for Regimen E. So if you can go to the next slide. I do want to mention that, as announced yesterday, we are so excited to partner with Essentia Health from Duluth, Minnesota, and these are pictures from sort of the press release and some news that went that were published yesterday, I believe, and so this was really based on a community coming together to support the expansion in an area where they generally don't have ALS drug trials available. So this is really great news for people in Minnesota who didn't have the opportunity before. So it's great that we're expanding to areas, to new areas based on sort of community support, and really they really wanted to make it happen for their community, which is fantastic. Next slide. I do want to mention that we recently went through an upgrade process of our website to make sure that we can make it more clear and more intuitive for everyone who wants to know which sites are recruiting. So that, and actually Catherine, who's on the line, our patient navigator, really was instrumentally in making this happen. So essentially now we updated the enrollment status for every site. So for example, just, if you can look at an example here, but you can use the QR code and go to the website, which is live. As you can see here, there are some sites that are active, but not recruiting. Those are sort of the older sites that have been active in the platform trial and have participants in regimens A, B, C, and D. So they're active in the network. They're one of the 74 sites of the network, but they haven't been activated for regimen E yet. In terms of regimen E, there is one site actually that was already activated, Lehigh Valley Health Network. And so that's the one site that's recruiting participants at this time. So essentially what we're going to do is as real time as possible, we will update the website so that every time an old site or a new site becomes active for regimen E and therefore begins to enroll participants for regimen E, we will change their status on the website so that we'll go from active not recruiting to recruiting. So again, it's the ones that are active, they're still working hard, but it's only when they are switched to recruiting that they can enroll new participants. Next slide. And so we're going to be activating sites in sort of groups, depending on, again, where they are with their activation materials, training, certificates, and contracts. So overall, we are planning on activating about 20 sites per month. And again, it's going to be about we say about 65 because we don't know for sure that all of them will be able to be activated on time. So it's possible that all 74 will be activated, or some may not be able to be activated in time, or may choose not to participate based on their local facilities and availability. So right now we have activated one, Lehigh Valley. On the slide, you see the first group of 20 that's really being activated anytime now, and then every month we will activate a new group essentially until we get to the grand total, and then the enrollment is competitive. So if we kind of fill up all the spots right away, then again, it's going to be the first sites that will have more availability, and then as they all come online, hopefully we'll be able to offer these broadly from a geographic point of view. Next slide. And as always, we will continue to update you. As you may imagine, this is a very dynamic situation with new sites coming online. And as soon as they complete their processes, they can be activated. So we will continue to provide updates. Right now, we have one site that's been activated for regimen E, and we expect many more sites to be activated really anytime now, so any day. So we will continue to provide you updates with the new sites. And we hope that sort of the rearrangement of the website will make it super clear for patients to know which sites are enrolling for regimen E at any given time. I do want to mention that the same information is also available on clinicaltrials.gov. There is a little bit of a lag because we don't directly administer the website. So again, all the websites should be aligned, but forgive us if there's a few days of delay again because of the synchronization. You can always contact Catherine, who's here with me today, our patient navigator, and she just put in the chat her email and phone number in case you have questions about the website or how to find a site that's enrolling, or if you want to know if a site near you, where they are in the activation process, and so expected timelines for that site. And we do have guest speakers. We're planning, the guest speaker series for the year, and specifically we will have a couple of site PIs come and join us in February, and their names are on the slide. So we're very happy to welcome guests from Henry Ford and from Wake Forest over the next few weeks, and we'll get to know their sites. I think for those of you who have been on these calls, it's always nice to hear from PIs and see every clinic is a little bit different. Some have more trials, some have fewer trials, but it's always great to get to know more about their staff and their work. So with that, I think we can stop sharing the slides. And as always, the best part of this is really the Q&A. Catherine, would you want to read the questions for me?
Sure. So we did have a few questions come in already. One of them is, what criteria are used to select new regimens for the HEALEY platform trial, and who makes that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is a therapy evaluation committee that's part of our governance of the platform trial, and the members are a number of scientists and experts in ALS science and research and clinical trials, and so they review applications on a rolling basis. So in order for a therapy to be included in the platform trial, the company or the investigator that is, sort of supporting the research in that area needs to submit an application. And our application is actually available online on our website. So companies can submit an application, and then their application is reviewed. And the therapy evaluation committee sort of decides if that drug is a good fit for the platform trial at that time. So what are the criteria? Well, the number one criterion is science, meaning, is there interesting, promising science behind that drug based on experiments in the lab, and also based on previous trials. Many of these drugs have been tested either in previous ALS trials or in trials in other neurological diseases. And so there's already some data available, both in the lab, but also in early phase trials. Now, the platform trial is potentially a registration trial. So what that means is that it's a large size trial. And if the drug is positive in this trial, we have all the tools, the statistical methods, etc., to really support, if the results are very positive, the registration of a new drug. So for a drug to be eligible for this type of trial, a registration trial, we need to have information from previous studies about the safety, about the dose and target engagement. And so again, not all drugs are a good fit, but it might be a good fit in the future. So some companies submitted applications, and the science is great, but maybe they're not quite there in terms of the phase of the trial, and so they can submit an application in the future once they have more data to support their application.
Thank you. That's such a comprehensive answer. That's so helpful. So there are a couple of questions here. People looking forward toward Regimen E. Someone's asking, based on what you were saying just now, what's the testing background for trehalose, the drug that's studied in Regimen E?
Yeah, so basically it's been tested in a number of preclinical models, including models of ALS, and it's also been tested in early phase human trials of a different neurological disease. Now, I wanted to say that we are so excited that we have the scientists at Trehalose that are ready to come and give a webinar on the mechanism of action of their drug. So they'll go into much greater detail. We're still awaiting approval of the slides. And so as soon as that's available, the reason we have one central IRB that governs the approvals for the trial. And so every time we bring in a new speaker, we need to have, if they talk about a new topic like mechanism of action of a new drug, we need to have the slides approved by the central IRB, which is essentially the ethics committee that reviews everything that goes, that becomes public facing. And so, because the IRB is managing all these different submissions, adding new sites, for example, for the regimen, they haven't had the chance to approve the slides yet. So as soon as that happens, we will have a dedicated webinar on that.
And someone here is asking, based on the number of total sites that we just shared, how fast do you expect Regimen E to be fully enrolled? And then is there a Regimen F coming shortly?
Yeah, no, both great questions. So I had to say, I'm very optimistic that Regimen E will enroll. The only thing that, gives us pause is sort of the disruption caused by the pandemic. It's not just the pandemic itself, it's the staff shortages and supply chain shortages that are sort of an indirect consequence of the pandemic. And actually the entire industry of healthcare is still having a problem with that. So it could be that, we're not as fast because of everything else that's going on. So absolutely, given the number of sites, I really hope that this is going to go fast. But again, there's a few uncertainties just in the marketplace based on sort of capacity at the sites.
And there's just a nice comment in here, I think, based on your background, Dr. Paganoni, that you need more room for all your well-deserved awards in the background there.
That's nice. Thank you.
Another question in the chat is, when will the expanded access program be established, and how will the enrollment be set up for that? Will it be based on ineligibility for clinical trials, or can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we already established what we call an expanded access companion to the platform trial. So what that means is that we have a program at about 9 sites where the sites can enroll a small group of people who are not eligible for the platform trial to receive the drug open access or expanded access. So essentially for people who cannot participate in the trial, they can receive the active drug for several months, essentially until we know the results of the platform trial itself. So that's already available. I had to say I wish it was bigger, but it's basically funded by philanthropy. And so we have been fundraising for it. And so we hope to continue to expand. Obviously, there's also been legislative changes and other things that are happening sort of in the ALS space. So I hope that in the future that will grow bigger. Again, it's only for people who are not eligible for the trial. I also realized I didn't answer the second question that was asked earlier. Sorry, I got distracted. They also asked about Regimen F and when are the new regimens coming. So I want to go back to that. So absolutely. So we are working actively with 2 companies, and a third is gonna, sort of essentially about to start. The work is about to start in terms of design. So design means that every time that we include a new drug, we need to work with the company to make sure that the design of the trial includes all the specifications that are important for that particular drug. So for example, if there's a specific biomarker that makes sense for that drug, but maybe not for the other drugs, we need to add it in. And so we are working, we are in that phase with these drugs. Obviously, until, we finish the design, we cannot launch the regimen. I would say that 2022 is a little bit of a special year for ALS, because as you know, there's a couple of drugs that might be approved and become available on the market this summer, specifically oral edaravone and AMX35. And there's been recent press releases by the companies, that share that basically the drugs are under review at the FDA under priority review. So we do expect a decision on them very soon. And so I think this is going to work out that basically, the first half of the year, it's dedicated to the current regimens, and hopefully we'll have good news in terms of new drugs. And then the second half of the year, it's going to be dedicated, we almost reset in a way with a new standard of care with the new regimens that we're working on.
Somebody just recently tuned into the webinar, so welcome. We're glad you made it. She's asking, is the Regimen E expected to stop, reverse, or slow disease?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the honest answer is that we don't know, because until we start testing the drug, we don't know what the effect in people will be. So there's data in preclinical labs, and sort of, that makes us hopeful that it could be a good fit for ALS, and the extent of the effect, we really don't know.
And we're back to a question about EAPs. Are there any West Coast sites that will offer expanded access?
Right. So actually, yes, we are working with a West Coast site, specifically in San Francisco, CPMC, that is working on activation, and so basically, it's not active yet, but as soon as that gets activated, we'll be offering EAP. We also have one that's also working on activation very, very close in Texas.
And there are a few questions that came in, not directly related to the platform trial, but somebody was wondering if you have any update on Prime C and Mass General's collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting compound. And so we've had a collaboration with them for quite some time now in terms of sharing biosamples that can be helpful to investigate biomarkers. And that's one thing that I know we don't always talk about it on these webinars, but, you know, one component of our research program is to share data and share samples. And so, and we share those freely with companies and researchers around the world who have good ideas. And so I think that's something that's really important, because that helps you know, others sort of leverage some of the existing samples and existing data to advance their own programs, because ultimately, you know, we want good ideas to advance, and so that's why we share it. And we have a whole infrastructure here funded by foundations and philanthropy to be able to house, you know, the samples and the data, etc., and share them.
There's a question that came in going back to the discussion of AMX and potential approval in June. If AMX is approved in June, would it be allowed, or would those medications that are approved be allowed for future regimens and platform trials?
Yeah, again, what we want to do, and we've said that on this webinar, is to allow people who enter the trial to receive standard of care medications, and the standard of care may change over time. So right now we allow people who enter the trial to take riluzole and or edaravone if they want, because they are FDA approved. So in the future, we imagine a scenario where if there's more drugs that are approved, people can take those drugs and, you know, they can decide whether to take the drugs or not, and then enter the trial. Again, the exact timelines and how that will impact current participants, we're still discussing that with our patient advisors, etc. Obviously, there's some uncertainty about the exact timelines, so that will matter in terms of you know, how all of this lines up. But I think, you know, I'm optimistic that everything will line up so that we can, you know, allow participants to be on drug, and also be able to do the scientific analysis and statistical analysis that will be able to tell us if the new drugs work or not.
And they're actually just curious, is there any flavor in the powder of AMX 35?
So, and this is public news, you know, the drug does have a bitter flavor. So that's what was tested in the trial. So again, in terms of future formulations, I would suggest that you contact the company directly. In the trial that we did, the drug was bitter. And there were solutions for that in terms of ways to sort of mask the bitter taste.
We have another question about expanded access. Do people in expanded access programs have the risk of being on placebo? Or why would they join trial versus expanded access?
Yeah,
programs?
So expanded access by definition doesn't have a placebo. Expanded access is a way to provide access to drugs to people who are not eligible for ALS trials. So that's how we view them, and that's the most common way they're sort of designed and applied. And so essentially, they shouldn't interfere with the field's with the testing of new drugs, because otherwise we'll never know if the drugs work or not. And so they're really meant to provide access to the medication to people who cannot participate in the testing, which will ultimately, you know, be able to tell if the drugs work or not for everyone.
There's a couple of questions about Regimen E that we can probably combine. So
yeah,
Regimen E, you're saying that it's been tested in other trials of different motor neuron diseases. Be able to talk a bit more about that. And then for this platform trial, is Regimen E geared toward any specific type of ALS, familial, sporadic?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. So it's actually for all types of ALS, familial, sporadic, you know, any type of ALS, because it does target a common mechanism, and specifically it targets autophagy, which is a mechanism that's important in all forms of motor neuron disease and also other forms of other neurological diseases. So specifically, it was actually tried in OPMD, which is a form of muscular dystrophy, oculopharyngeal muscular dystrophy. And so that's, one disease state where it was tested. It's not ALS, it's a different neurological disease.
And someone's asking, going back to when we were talking about expanded access, you were saying that you have to be ineligible for a trial. Does that mean medically ineligible or that the trial is full?
Right, medically ineligible, yeah. I mean, in theory, if there were no trials available, I mean, that's a good point, that there would be a different scenario. But I had to say, right now, there are several trials that are available for ALS at different sites.
And are there any plans to start looking for additional sites to offer EAPs through the companion program?
Yeah, absolutely. We have asked, the different sites, which sites are interested and which are not. And I believe we got a positive response from about 18 sites so far. And of those, 9 have been selected to enter, really based on sort of, the sort of bandwidth of the site. Those are the sites that had already enrolled many people in the platform trial and said, we had the patient population and the resources at the site to be, meaningful participants of the EAP program. And also geographically, we didn't want only sites in one geographic area. So we did select based on that as well. And so absolutely, we continue to fundraise to be able to add more sites. And so, as again, new fundraising activities happen, hopefully we'll be able to select from the other 9 that have already expressed interest. And I'm sure there will be more that could potentially be interested in the future.
We have a couple of questions not directly related to the platform trial, but there are some folks who are wondering if there's been any news on stem cell therapies.
Yeah. So basically, I was not directly involved with the neuron trial or any other stem cell trial. So I think, we just like you, basically I learned from sort of, what's publicly available. And so I don't have any specific insights. Yeah. This is great. I think we answered. Oh, there's a question about insurance coverage of new drugs. Well, that's a great question. I had to say, in the US, there's an approval process which is regulated by the FDA. The pricing and the insurance reimbursement is a completely separate process. So, in other words, if a drug is approved by the FDA, that doesn't automatically mean that it's approved by insurance companies. My hope is that, new drugs will be approved. I do know that for rare diseases, it's more likely than not that there's going to be a pre-authorization process. That's just how the system works for rare diseases. And so that could be, something that we're going to have to see. But I know that companies always, try to work ahead of time to ensure that, there's going to be a path. And so I do think that, there will be insurance approval, but obviously all of this will require sort of time for the system to get adjusted to, and hopefully we'll be able to support everyone who wants to have access to the new drugs. And I see there was a question about how many people are in the OLE. So thank you for pulling the slide. 365 so far. Yeah. And and the last question I see here, in terms of, combining drugs, I mean, absolutely. I think that long-term, that's what, I think is going to happen, that, that number one, there's going to be combination of drugs. It's possible that, there will be, again, we have hopefully 2 new drugs on the market in 2022 for ALS, and more could come, from this trial or other trials. And I think it would be great to combine them. Ideally, if, it's possible that in the future drugs will be combined in the same pill or powder, I think that, as obviously as things are developed, that's going to be something that the manufacturers will look into, I'm sure. Great. Okay, so thank you so much. I mean, as always, it's a pleasure to get questions and provide updates, and we'll be here again next week. Thank you. Thank you so much.